Good morning. We're calling to order our Economic Development Committee meeting. Thank you everyone who's joining us via live stream or watching the recording. It's nice to have you with us. We have our Economic Development Director, Michelle Blair, with us today. We have our Finance Director, Joe Riegelsberger. Of course, our City Manager, Eric Hansen, and our Assistant City Manager, Jennifer Heft. And we have Jenna Hurley, one of our admin staff, and we have our Law Director, Jeff Forbes. And of course, Council Members Honor Law and Vice Mayor Gilb. Did I miss anyone? And Jason, our ICRC partner. Is there anyone I missed? Awesome. All right, so we've been learning a lot over the past month, and our staff has been doing some research, and I was wondering if we could start off with someone from staff updating us on what's been going on so far. Council has received memos about it, but the public hasn't. And you can talk about your business resource and recovery team that you've formed and some things that you've been learning along the way.
Yeah, Mayor, I can start. As you mentioned, probably about a month ago, realizing some of the impacts here. We have an incident command team that I know Council's familiar with that is running the crisis, and our police chief and fire chief, along with staff from all departments, comprise that team. These are not normal operations by any measure. I spend a lot of time asking the public for patience and maybe apologizing a lot of services and responsiveness that they're accustomed to. We just can't deliver on. Folks are not working from offices, trying to work from home, but that's not everything is possible being done that way. Formed the business recovery team, and Joe and Michelle are what I call the co-captains of that, but have led a team of other employees from a variety of departments, a variety of experience to try and get educated specifically on business recovery. It's a fast moving landscape, and so having kind of a core of folks there that are part of their function is paying attention to that and building our internal education has been helpful. Probably I'll make one comment and then ask Joe and Michelle to kind of speak to what we've done so far and some of the ideas that they have put together with the team. One item though of business outside of that, maybe to address early on, Council adopted Ordinance 2020-43, which is basically authorizing a service agreement with the CDC for a gift card program. We've discussed that a couple of times, a couple of proposals from the CDC. I've had some very good, some very encouraging conversations with Sherry Taylor. We do not have a service agreement negotiated yet, but based on my last conversation, they remain very committed. And based on what we talked about, I'm pretty optimistic that we'll be able to put together an agreement that fits within Ordinance 2020-43. So I don't have any specific deadlines or items to report yet on that, but feeling pretty optimistic that we're on a path there. That being said,
can I jump in and ask something real quick about that? Do you know, so how long ago, do you know the date? How long has this been in their hands for them and us to try to work something out? Has it been a few days? Has it been a week? Has it been 2 weeks? When did you ask the revised 43?
I think Ordinance 43 was adopted. I'd have to double check, but I'm going to guess 2 weeks ago or
it was April 14th.
So right on 2 weeks ago.
Okay. I'd like to maybe this I need to bring this up in the next council meeting, but I'd be interested in putting a time limit on that. And if they're not interested in doing something like in the next 3 days, the whole point of this was to do something immediately. And if they're not interested, I think we pick it up and do it ourselves. That's where I'm thinking, because it's been a long time, and the whole point was to get something going immediately. That's what that program was for. Those are just my thoughts. I want to jump in and throw those out there before I forget about them. You can continue. Thanks.
Well, full council authorized Ordinance 43. It did not have a time limit for execution on it. So if you want to do something like that, I'm not sure the format, but it'd be appropriate to do that. You'd need a vote of council to change the direction there. Otherwise,
Okay.
I've been working with the CDC moving forward to execute something. It is fair to say that when it was adopted on the 14th, the CDC wasn't prepared. It was amended that night,
That's
and
right.
they probably didn't see it until the next day or.
Yeah,
or
that's
so.
fair. Thank you.
And Mike,
Let me get off. I don't know if this is the right time to bring this up. I wanted to just float an idea to the committee on what to do on the backside of the gift card program, how to use the gift cards to help incentivize people to shop local, and potentially to create some opportunity for distributions of the gift cards. And then if people use them, the city reimburse that use. So it gets away from that burden. I think part of the concern in the gift card program was putting a burden on local small businesses, and thinking of a way to incentivize economic opportunities for small businesses, maybe perhaps distributing the cards out to the community. I don't know how we do that, but thinking how we do that. And then as people use the cards, the merchant could turn it back into the city either as a tax credit or a reimbursement back from the city. And maybe we could talk about that later, but I just wanted to float that idea out there as maybe an ability to use the gift cards that are purchased as a way to incentivize people to use our local small businesses and keep those businesses moving forward as we come out of the backside of this recovery. But just wanted to float that idea. We could talk about it. I thought it'd be good to talk about it in committee.
Dang, you're stealing my thunder. I had that as a notes, as an idea I was going to bring forth. So we're thinking along the same lines. I'm a little disappointed I had to bring that forward.
Two points there. Part of that conversation with CDC representatives and some of their sensitivities, and I think we made progress on, is how to structure that in terms of expiration dates, redemption values, so that it's so that the liability, long-term liability creates on a business is minimized, as well as how it can be used to incentivize, to the vice mayor's words, additional local shopping. And that's where, without going into those details, pretty confident we'll make progress on that. And then maybe to both TJ and the vice mayor, as part of our conversation with the business recovery team, they have explored options where we can kind of use a loaded phrase, but kind of create stimulus impacts within the community to drive business long-term back locally. So I think that will naturally come up as they review some of the brainstorming and progress we've made.
Okay.
Unless there's other questions, Mayor, I'd go ahead and ask Michelle. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. I'd love to piggyback on what they're suggesting. And, I thought we'd be farther underway by now, because the nifty format is a great way to mitigate that liability, because the city can set time frames in the gift cards. Normally a gift card never expires, but with the nifty program, there were options to stagger stimulus into the community and distribute the gift card capability to residents to use. So they get a benefit of having a gift card to use on a participating business of their choice. And you can create start dates and end dates for those gift cards. So let's say we had a 2-week window for a surge of gift cards that we send out somehow. And if a resident forgets to use it, then that automatically expired, but the city didn't lose the investment in the initial gift card. So I think the nifty program it's up and running and ready to go. The platform's there. It's what does the CDC want to do with that platform, and how do they best think we can create surges or stimulus in the local economy over time? or, all up front. I don't know what their recommendations are, but I'm disappointed because I haven't been able to have a conversation with them about this topic. So, I have lots of ideas. So anyway, I know that you're trying to handle that and be the conduit between the CDC and this program. So I'm anxious to hear updates when you all get them.
Well, I just remind everyone, Ordinance 2020-43 was adopted by council. And so now, the authorization is already there. The execution then falls on staff, working within the parameters of 2020-43, which is where we've been, some of the dialogue, making sure that we were aligned within the already established parameters. As far as, we'll need to handle that on a staff level, unless council wants to adjust those parameters.
And Mayor, if I could address that. So I think we drafted the amendment to 2020-43 fairly broad to give you a lot of leeway in terms of how that gift card program could come into operation and operate. There's not a lot of requirements or directions in terms of how to do that. And that was by design. So there could be flexibility in the service agreement in terms of how that comes together, and certainly encourage creativity and ingenuity as you pull that service agreement together. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, that's why I was bringing that up. And I know that there was some criticism from the public that it was adopted with no plan. But the way I was thinking of it is, oh, well, we already have a platform. It's already going. So we can, partner with the CDC to promote it, enhance what we're doing, or to give us ideas and guidance. But we also already have a platform that was running, and we had been communicating about that. So in my mind, I thought, oh, we have a plan. We just need to enhance what we're already doing, and hopefully in partnership with the CDC. So I am disappointed that we haven't gotten that $160,000 stimulus going yet, but I'm confident that we will be able to. And that sometimes you do write legislation in a broad sense so that you can have that flexibility to meet needs and you don't have to go back and readdress it. So does anybody else have anything about the gift card program? We can move on.
I think we'll want to talk as the business recovery team goes through. We'll come back to the gift card program and how that fits in some of the other brainstorming.
Great, thank you so much. So another piece of legislation we've been working on is Ordinance 46. And we got a lot of feedback from council and from the public that wanted more information about it. Staff has been working on research and developing ideas to present to council and to the committee. And our most recent memo we got on April 23rd had some real specific ideas, possibilities. I'll call them possibilities for right now. There's the Concept Business Service Program, Concept Business Expense or Grant Loan Program option, and Concept Economic Development Forgivable Loan is kind of a phase two, approach. And so if staff is willing, could someone talk about what we know so far?
Mayor, maybe if Joe and Michelle could kind of summarize where we've been a little bit and then where we're looking at going. I think that'd be helpful to give the full context of. Michelle, Joe, if you guys want to tag team off each other, I'll go on mute. So.
By the way, just so the public knows, because it's an open meeting, we can't rehearse what we're going to do prior to or to come up with our game plan. So if you think it seems very improvised, it is. It's very organic right now. And I really appreciate staff being willing to help us through this. Thank you to our finance director and economic development directors. Take it away.
You want to start, Michelle?
I'll start. So good morning, everybody, Mayor and council members. Forgive me, I'm suffering from some allergies here. So I have a little bit of a intermittent cough. I think the pollen's up. I wanted to, as Eric requested, just kind of go over a little bit of background. What seems like well over a month ago put together, and as part of the thinking around council and the city's reaction to COVID-19, a resource and recovery team. One thing that I think we all feel really good about at the city is our ability to leverage our cross-departmental resources. And in this case, we have a group of about 20 city staff members across all of the departments. And I know we like to say that everybody at the city does economic development. It is true, whether we're building a new building or working on a recruitment project. And in this case, really shifting and rallying our thinking and brainstorming to what is happening, learning and understanding from our different partners, both council, our local business community, the county, our regional resources, the state, et cetera. So, kind of that sphere of our awareness. And so with that team, we put together some conversations so that we can all try to keep up and have that team learning about what those resources are. You covered already what's underway. So I know in the memo, we did a recap, some of the things that happened initially, which the Nifty Yifty program, which Jenna can speak to as we get into that, and looking at the alternatives and ways to further leverage that program. But unless you think, Eric, I need to go back through any specifics, or council can committee can weigh in. But generally speaking, it is a platform, really interesting one. Sometimes best practices are learned from things that other people are doing, and so council and the city jumped in, and I think we are definitely learning the expanded capabilities of things that we can do that with that program. I think one thing that strikes a chord with me is that for a long time now, and we cover that a little bit in the memo, we want to figure out ways to connect the entire business community. The community center has been, I think, a really good model for us to bring together the resources in the community, small and large, and be that connective tissue, and leveraging the membership of the community center and other services there through the Nifty Yifty program is one example. So that's the way that we pushed out some gift cards, and then the encouragement of exposing the small businesses that are out there, and in this case, really wanting to drive more activity. So I think more to come on that, and more conversation for sure. But is that enough on the quantity of Nifty Yifty? Additionally, resource and recovery. On the resource side, the website and those media outlets are always a way. So as you know, it's an ongoing process for us to continue to build and connect our resources on the website. We launched the video informational series, and expect that's going to be a really nice way for us to continue that culture of wellness conversation in this time of resource and recovery. So we see that expanding. As you know, right now there's 3 videos up there that are talking about some of that immediate, localizing really the immediate need and relief that is out there. And I think again, the team continues to look at how can we leverage important relationships and important resources across the community, across the region, that could come together and localize some valuable things for the city of Mason and its community. So again, we'll be looking and continuing to develop that. And then I think thirdly, the memo goes through, Mayor, as you point out, some concepts that the team, the smaller team, Joe and I, and 5 or 6 others that are more intimately involved in business development, retention, expansion efforts, just really putting our heads together and outlining those 3 concepts. I can just highlight them and then stop talking for a few minutes and we can talk more. But you mentioned there's the Concept Business Service Program. Some of this was talked about at council. So again, just a recap. The Concept Business Service Program really targeted, the first two programs really targeted to look at customer-facing, consumer-based retail businesses, those in our community that were immediately hit by the stay-at-home order. And those typically are 50 and below. And the first one really is 50 employees and below, retail facing. So how do we infuse relief to that group of businesses and structure a business service program? I would say that that program, we gave some concepts, and whether or not that platform is leveraged with something else that we already have, or becomes something on its own, but really is looking at some conceptual funds, in this case, up to $1,000, and service related, partnership related. The second program that we outlined is the Concept Business Expense Loan Program. And that program also, in tandem, could be paired with the one that I just referenced, but is targeted towards 50 employees and below, as well as those under $1 million in payroll. Looking at learning about the most needed ways that we could impact business expenses, utilities, rent, other things. When I say we, I say this, these are concepts and ways that we could look at how we partner, or what pieces of it fit with what council wants to pursue. And again, that one focused customer, consumer based, B2B business services. It's really more of a category of businesses that fit into that that division, less than sector. And then the range there is somewhere between 2,500 and 15,000. I think less on the numbers, because these are for concept purposes, and more on how you want to target these particular sectors, and then use a formula to essentially be Switzerland, so that you can look at the need, apply a formula, and then make some recommendations. And then the third concept, economic development forgivable loan, that is for those, again, not narrowed to, let's say just manufacturing or corporations, but across all businesses that are above $1 million in payroll, and could access these funds in a forgivable format, again, that would be allocated by formula. The program, could be structured with some flexibility that could be used for not only companies that have, verified a particular impact because of COVID, because of their industry sector, and or those that are trying to get their feet underneath them and were in a relocation or an attraction period. They're looking for a place to locate, and that would allow us to also look at maybe utilizing this for that work as well. These are and the concepts would look at return on investment through the annual payroll that each of those companies generate. Similar concepts to that we typically use. I'm going to stop there for a minute. There are some, we put some other thinking in there, and maybe this is a good time for me to pause, and then Joe can take over and talk about alternate ways that we also thought we could impact business expenses right now.
Sure. Yes, we certainly, as we were going through this brainstorming process and trying to be able to look at all options and possibilities, trying to be able to come up with what would be the what could we do as a city, and how could we be able to provide relief? And we were coming up with, ideas, and I don't think that there was anything off the table. And certainly the three that Michelle presented were, we saw as very doable and viable. Certainly the need to work with partners, certainly we can't do it alone, and we would need assistance from the entire community to be successful in many of these programs. But we were also looking at other options, such as perhaps providing some sort of relief to as far as with the utility bill, to be able to make something more broad to not just businesses but residents as well. So those are things that we continue to explore as far as how we could be able to do that. How can we provide incentives for residents to be able to help or encourage them to help small businesses as well. So like I said, we continue to try and work on those items, try and brainstorm, try and explore options, just to be able to consider anything and everything at this point. So those are just a few of the things that we continue to try and think beyond just how to provide direct assistance to small businesses. I don't know if there's
It's a good time for questions.
Mayor, I was going to kind of maybe quickly review or some distinguishing between what Michelle and Joe have developed. If you look at that first concept, that's kind of a broad stroke, $1,000. The return is that we would expect some type of service agreement with the city, some commitment that may be nebulous at first, but to partner in the future, maybe on things like marketing, community center, golf, things that we typically do or well rehearsed at, but a quick flush to get out there. We would need, and Jeff may want to speak to this just overall at some point, we need a kind of a more of a corporate arm component outside of the city machinery to help us distribute that, because it will not be easy for the city to send those dollars. And I'm not talking easy as a matter of staff, I mean legally easy to distribute that. The second piece is more driven by what the city cares about is payroll, would scale up the payroll and is more like a forgivable loan concept that we've talked about before based on how much payroll activity that business may generate. And then and that also would need some third-party conduit to help assist us with distributing that. And then the third one is much more similar to what we typically do in terms of economic development and incentivizing larger employers to grow their payroll or to retain their payroll. So it's probably a lot more familiar to this committee and to staff. The first two are trying to be nimble and approach it from other ways. And then what I call, what Joe touched on is the more creative solution. Instead of looking at, instead of filtering it through what the business is or what its impact is, it's more kind of stimulus, much more broad brush to get dollars redeemed out there that then, and the trick is making sure those dollars are then spent locally to generate the economic activity. So I just wanted to weigh in with that to kind of give you the distinctions between them.
Yeah, so Eric, I don't know if you can get into that, but I'm certainly hearing that the distribution side of this is somewhat difficult, and I don't want to get real deep into that issue, but wonder if you could touch on the legal hurdles we have to overcome in terms of being able to make distributions on a general basis out from the city out into the community. But
I'll give you the city manager version while Jeff is warming up the attorney version. It's just a basic, rule of thumb. Public funds, which is the majority of what the city handles, can't be used for a private purpose. And that's, in a macro way, you can define a public purpose. In a micro way, it's much more difficult. And I don't know if Jeff can, I'm sure Jeff can be more precise than I am.
That's actually I mean, obviously Eric and I have talked about this quite a bit, and that's actually pretty accurate and pretty precise. I mean, and you can see it actually in other programs that the city has been involved in. We have moved to a service agreement concept with all of those other programs where we are trying to get funds to programs that support city residents and other businesses in the city. The city's been involved in what amounts to forgivable loan projects in the past, but never directly from the city. Those are always funneled through other partner organizations, whether it's the Port Authority or other organizations like the CIC or the CDC. And those are always done through contracts, through service agreements. And I think I'm kind of losing track of when I've talked about this, whether it's been in other committees or other full council meetings, but what it really boils down to is, and Joe, I think, will appreciate this, every dollar that the city spends that goes out, it's all reviewed by the auditors. And the auditors ultimately will make a determination about whether that was done for a valid public purpose. I mean, what the state auditor's office will tell you, and through guidance, is that it's city council that makes a determination of what constitutes a valid public purpose. But when it comes to something that may appear to be donations or money that goes out, even the auditor's office has said, if money is going to go out, there needs to be some demonstrable benefit to the city. And the way you can ensure that is through a service agreement. That's why we've moved to a service agreement concept. So essentially what you're saying is we are going to be able to expend city funds pursuant to a service agreement. That service agreement will state, here are the benefits that we expect to see in return for these funds. And they're accountable, they're demonstrable, and it's something that you can show an auditor to say, we actually got something for these dollars that we spent. So that's why many of these ideas that are great ideas, there is an initial hurdle that the city can't just always do it on its own. There has to be some service agreement with the partner so that we can demonstrate what the benefit has been, if that helps.
And Mayor, if I could follow up, maybe to Michelle or Joe, I think the resource recovery team has been monitoring federal and state relief programs, CARES Act program type relief. And I'm wondering if you have any information on how that relief is helping locally, if it is helping locally, and what's happening in that arena.
I can go ahead. I think that you all are also pretty on the ground in terms of hearing from the local businesses that, each of us support. We have heard from surveys. I know that folks like the Maid Chamber are doing, and others. There's so many stories out there. And a lot of them are focused around who's recently been funded and the next wave of the funding that's been released and who's in the queue. It's definitely one of those things that seems like it's a time machine, right? As we really try to figure out who's getting relief, who's kind of caught in the middle, and what the impacts are. So I'm not sure I'll have anything to say that that might enlighten you more than others. I have heard stories of people that did receive their PPP last week. That's great. Folks that had put their some of our smaller businesses who asked their landlords for rent, grace for a month or two, that are now back online and will be reopening and starting to pay rent again. I think the stories are across the board, and we'll probably spend the next 6 months trying to figure out and learning, where the biggest impacts are. So it's work in progress. I'm not sure that that's super helpful, Vice Mayor, but definitely our ears are to the ground. We do a weekly call with our regional partners. As you know, companies have assembled the Restart program in Cincinnati that's built with representatives from many of our larger companies. And then, the state of Ohio is doing the same thing. And then also there's a few of our local corporate representatives are even at the national level. I think they're all trying to look at the things that this council and our cities, looking at is how is the impact shaking out. So.
And I would say that, we're trying to watch the same thing that everyone else is watching. A lot of that relationship is between the small business and the financial institution. So we're not really much of a part of that, but we are watching things at the federal and state level and trying to understand how that filters down. But that information is hard to find. And certainly Michelle probably has a better idea than what I would, especially since we're responsible for collecting taxes. I think the one thing that helps all, not only small businesses, but all businesses and individuals, that we've delayed the filing and the paying for tax returns until July 15th. So they're gaining an extra 3 months before they have to pay what is owed. So that's certainly helping with that. And certainly they're not necessarily contacting the person responsible for the taxes on much of what's going on at this point. Kind of like when you do a improvement on a home or something like that, nobody's calling the county auditor to let you know what that improvement is done. So we're probably the last to hear.
I think that open communication piece, though, is just, collecting those, those on the ground stories that are localized, that are from the Mason business community is definitely something we're on mission to do, whether it's through our own, resources or our partner organizations. I think the more that we can learn, the better.
Got a few questions. When it comes to the deliverables, I love the service agreement for the smaller package that's available. Maybe some of our really small businesses, if they're interested in that. When it comes to the larger packages or the second two that we talked about, I like how there is a metric based on payroll revenue, annual payroll revenue generation. And I'm wondering, can they pay off principal or some percentage of principal through their city tax withholdings? Is that a possibility? So let's say they meet the whatever criteria we set of being open and they're working through it, and can we forgive maybe 50% through the tax withholdings that we're keeping, depending on what our criteria are? Is that a way to help alleviate the payment process for them? That may have been a really weird way to ask that question. I'm sure it was.
Probably a roundabout way, but and this is still conceptual, so keeping, kind of disregarding amounts and timeframes. But the notion, the core economic development notion is, in a forgivable loan, is that we loan you dollars and it's based on your performance in generating payroll. We measure it based on generating payroll. We don't necessarily move it through the tax department. We don't count the taxes paid as the payment. We count that you kept your commitment to keep that payroll. The other end of it takes care of itself. Does that make sense? So you've lived up to your agreement because you created the payroll. We also presume you've paid your taxes. So we've gotten that withholding on the other side. So your loan performance is based on the payroll, not the tax payment that came with it, which may be a fine distinction, but it matters to to how we process it.
Okay. What percentage would you propose, if any, what percentage of the loan could be forgiven if they meet their pro forma? And what if they exceed their pro forma? Would that affect the percentage of the loan being forgiven?
I think that all depends on how much funding you authorize for that segment. You'd back into it from that.
Okay.
And I would say that we certainly were trying to come up with a range of ideas. And so I think we were looking for direction. I think with the second program, we were really focused on business retention and employee retention, whereas the third program, we were looking at growth and adding employment and adding employees and seeing a growth in the tax withholding.
Okay. What could we do if we had, let's say we had a business like a restaurant that the state is mandating they can't work at full capacity for a period of time because of social distancing, but they had a annual payroll revenue of $1 million or more. Is there something we can do to adapt? But because they may not really be able to accomplish the pro forma of getting everybody employed up to the same level because they can't get as many bodies in the seats of the restaurant to operate the same way they did, at least for the time being, I'm sure the next few months. Is there a way we can work around that for certain companies that through no fault of their own, the state is restricting how well they can and how much they can operate?
We were looking more long-term of where they would be, say 1 or 2 years out. So,
Okay.
that repayment would not occur like within months. It would be within a year or two, or it may be forgiven in a year or two. So depending on where they were at in the future. And that's similar to what we would have done with other larger businesses. So we're trying to be as consistent and fair as possible with what we have done previously.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think I would add to that the 1 year, given where we are today, seems kind of unpredictable. So
Yeah.
if you could lengthen, we, really were thinking, how do we sustain? It's a win if you keep businesses in business. But you're right, how many employees they have at one time or across maybe 2 shifts, depending upon the business. We don't really know what that looks like. So I think if you extend that and, you set a benchmark payroll from, pre-COVID, and then you can look at, 2 or 3 years, have you met that benchmark payroll? Once you get over that hump, you probably can feel satisfied that, that's your recovery action, right? That you've retained a business. It's not so much about what's your growth projection. It's about, can we stay in business? Where are we going from here?
Okay. So that kind of begs the question, which is on my list. How do we set a budget for this? And, we used the number 1.5 million with Ordinance 46, not to encumber it right away, but to just sort of have that in mind, set that aside. There are probably some ways we can identify funds in one sense. We're not using certain things, like we didn't use as much salt. That was a great example that was brought up. But then the other problem is our community center isn't open and we get revenue from that. So how do we identify funding, and then what is the maximum that we can afford? And then there's that whole component of the unknown and the total impact on the city's revenue intake. We can't predict that just yet. Our finance director gave us an idea of what it was like with the 2008 recession, right? Will it be more impactful with this one, with a total shutdown, or will it be about the same? How do we identify funding for this and move forward on it?
Mayor, I think when all's said and done, you're gonna have to kind of take an educated guess. And it's less about the need that is out there, because that is really immeasurable, because we don't know the breadth or the depth. So I think you're gonna have to just kind of, legislate, here's an amount. What will tell the tale there is then how the application process is done, what need is then expressed. And like what I said, when you have to back into it, we may set a target here of, $1,000 per application. But if you get, 3,000 applications, then you're going to have to kind of prorate it back into it. We would be reporting back to council. You would then need to make another decision. Okay, based on that need, can we afford to infuse more in that section? I think at the get-go, there's just no good way to give you solid numbers on that. You have to start a process with something. And then, like the word we use from the feds, it's that rolling guidance. As we learn more, because they're applying for a known amount, then you learn more. One of our ambitions here had been, because we're not the only entity, struggling with this and trying to fill a void or lend some assistance. We'd like to see, this type of effort cooperating with other entities like the county, the chamber, other private funds, so that application process or gateway kind of becomes a catch-all. So if other funding sources are identified, well, we've already gathered some of the application data. We know some of the folks that have expressed need and interest. And if there's another opportunity to go back to the well, we can use that same data instead of constantly recreating it. But initially, you have to kind of go, here's what I can afford right now until I know more.
One of the things we talked about was doing a phased approach to put it out there, see how many applicants we got within, maybe the application process, whatever that looks like is, a few days or a week, see how many requests we get, we fulfill those and get a better idea and can gauge what we might need in the future. And maybe there's a second phase where we open it back up. I know several other communities use that approach.
Yeah, the phasing in makes a lot of sense. And would we prioritize at first, maybe applicants who just couldn't benefit from the PPP, or maybe this is a better substitute? And the CARES Act, pardon my not getting those acronyms right, but is there a way we can prioritize and make sure those applicants certify that they have had damages from the economic shutdown?
Two parts. One, that they've been impacted by the shutdown, and two, that we anticipate a requirement, for lack of a better word, that they have pursued federal efforts.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay. All right. And then you were talking about that, trying to figure out a way to minimize the application or simplify the application process by maybe tapping into other organizations that are taking applications like the CDC or the Warren County Foundation, which I don't believe that program has launched yet. They're really taking their time to, they're crowdsource funding, but they're also working on the criteria and the execution of that. But my understanding is they're working really hard on that.
Yes, if we gather data as part of our process, we could use that same process, that same data to keep it a rolling application, so to speak.
If we were to phase in, let's say theoretically Ordinance 46 is adopted and we phased in a tranche at a time, like let's say, I'm throwing this out there, let's say we budgeted $500,000 or $300,000 for the first phase. Would we need to go back and reapproach, not reapproach, but would we need further ordinances to implement any programming or a second phase or a third phase if we didn't add anything to that amount of 1.5 million?
If you authorized Ordinance 46 if that were an authorized ordinance now, it by itself, it doesn't authorize, it kind of opens the door to other ordinances. It invites other ordinances that would specifically authorize either a partnership, a contract, or a program. And then, yes, depending on how those future ordinances were written, and what I'd be recommending is you authorize it to X dollar amount to administer X program. And then we would report back as that program is rolled out to come back and say, okay, the amount you authorized with ordinance X is 80% consumed, or whatever those reports would come back. We just need to keep council apprised so that you can consider whether it merited additional legislation.
Mike?
Yeah, Mayor, so, and maybe this is a question for Jeff Forbes, but I know the Federal CARES Act program had a self-certification process that was.
You're mute.
I'm on mute. Can you hear me now? Okay, all right. So I know the Federal CARES Act program was a self-certification process to kind of allow for quick access to that program, and people were certifying under some federal disclosure process. If we adopt them like a Mason CARES Act program where it's self-certifying, yes, I've been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. I am a small business. I need assistance. Jeff, do we have legislation in place that enables us to accept that certification and rely on it? And what's the ramification if somebody is gaming the system and isn't really affected, but they're certifying to us that they are affected? Is there a process for how that would work?
Let me take the first part first, and I would say you do not have legislation in place that addresses that now. And even if 46 is adopted, at least as it stands right now, like Eric said, that by itself does not really authorize the specific programs. I think what you're getting at is we would have to come back to council with an ordinance for a specific service agreement with some organization that you're going to use to help administer this. And then that service agreement could have, and I guess let me back up and say, any of these specific service agreements that we're thinking about or contemplating, they haven't been created yet at all. But that service agreement that might come about as a result of this could have provisions that say, because the goal of this is to get the funds in hands as quickly as possible, that it will be a self-certifying program, and people might, whatever the app, there will be some type of application process, and that application could have some kind of essentially like a notarized statement or something that says, I'm certifying that everything I've put in this application is true and accurate to the best of my knowledge, something to that effect. So I guess those are good questions, but those they will be answered in the specific terms of whatever these service agreements are that come out of this.
I think it would.
Question. Oh, sorry. Michelle, do you mind if I ask you? So the 1.5 million described in Ordinance 46, if that were adopted, are you saying that's not a blank check written to the city to do with whatever it wants?
I think Eric will be very happy to hear me say it is absolutely not a blank check to the city manager to do whatever he wants. And in fact, I guess I should point out, and maybe Eric is glad to hear me say that. Joe will be glad to hear me say Ordinance 46, as it's drafted, actually doesn't even appropriate any funds. Even if there were to be just a minor amendment to 46 as it stands now, you could make an amendment to Ordinance 46 to appropriate, let's just call it $1.5 million for programs And you may actually even want an amendment in there that clarifies that, and then each program will be authorized individually by council. So I hope that helps people understand that Ordinance 46 as it stands right now does not mean Eric has $1.5 million to go do whatever he comes up with.
Okay, did everybody hear that? It was never a blank check. Social media, my colleagues, that was Ordinance 46 is not a blank check. We're gonna have to go back to council step by step. That's a really important thing that we need to communicate to the public, because that message has gotten lost. That truth has gotten lost in all of these meetings. And so it's just really, really important that we understand that. Joe's hair may turn completely white within 6 months. I don't know, but we need to figure out how we can identify funding and set a budget for how we move forward and phase in. Does anybody else have questions or follow-up questions to what Jeff said? I know Michelle was ready to interject. Did we lose it? Did we lose your thought? Because I wasn't ready.
I think you covered it.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. So, you know, I know we're all anxious to get things rolling, because we do want to help and get started, and everything takes time, especially with government. Any thoughts on that with timing or follow-up meetings? We need to meet with the finance committee. TJ.
I would like the idea that since, as Joe mentioned, or not Joe, I'm sorry. Jeff mentioned that we were could amend 46, and we're looking at doing things in steps and phases. You know, I'm thinking we need to, I still feel that sense of urgency, especially with the revised 43. That money's not been getting into people's hands, of finding another initial step 2 of something that then gets amended into 46 somehow, but then we could try to get something going. So I keep feeling the sense of urgency of somehow getting something for the immediate help. But I don't know how that works other than what was described as maybe come at the council meeting. Is that correct?
I think if you were looking for legislation authorizing a step, and Joe or Jeff, Michelle, correct me if I'm wrong, but really the 2 key decision points there is a dollar amount and then a conduit. You know, so you're authorizing that service agreement with X at an amount not to exceed, you know, Y. That gives us the broadest authorization to then go put in the, you know, to get the partner to work out the particulars of how you would execute on that. Absent that, which is, you know, like in Ordinance 46, you don't have, you have the dollar amount, but you don't have the conduit, and you don't have a program listed. So for example, if the committee were to say, we really like concept 1 and 2, here's a dollar amount, you know, that we want to initiate that with. Here's the conduit that we want to use. I think that's enough for Jeff and Joe to get legislation drafted to put in front of council.
Okay. Chairman, I'm sorry, can I go ahead, Mayor? And so I had an idea. I ran this by Eric Hansen last week, just to try and think out loud and try to think what we can do. I'm looking for something that's fair. You know, all businesses are affected by this. Not only just not small businesses or downtown businesses, or brick and mortar businesses, but everybody is. And so I keep thinking how we can incentivize a little bit, and I'm not quite sure how this is a little different than what we passed, but this was just my thought process. So I'm just throwing it out here just as a brainstorming of what I was thinking. Originally, I'm thinking, what can we do to help citizens start getting back out and supporting Mason small businesses? Instead of giving money to the small businesses, if we could find a way, I was thinking even as a tax refund or a tax back to, if we give money back to citizens of a certain amount, or said for the next 3 months, every Mason resident that spends $500 over the next 3 months. If they save the receipts, this was my thought, they could turn it into the city on taxes and we would waive it. You know what I mean? So it'd be, they'd be able to spend free money. After talking to Eric, I found out we can't do that. There's lots of things in Joe's like, can he really think that way? But I did. I'm just trying to think outside what we can do that would be immediate help, that would help citizens and help the businesses. It's not picking winners and losers. We're letting people compete for those dollars. What then that kind of changed or morphed into a little bit was a little bit more of, let me see if I can find my notes. The idea of maybe if we it was more, I'm gonna call it a tax refund, but it's not gonna be that, but it would be, if we were to give every citizen $50, if it's a gift card, or if it's, I think, the Mason Bucks or something like that, saying, here's $50 of taxpayer money that you paid into the city, we'll give it back to you, and then you must spend this money on small businesses. There's 33,000 residents, 16,000 households. $50 is $800,000. But it was something that we could do immediately, quickly, could be a next step to, it's putting money in the hands of people immediately that could immediately start helping people as the business that are currently open, the mechanics and the people that are still going about, and the ones that are getting ready to reopen. Each week, I think the governor is allowing more and more. And if I can say my 2 cents, Governor, open us back up. That's my 2 cents on that. So I'd like to just kick that around and see anybody else's thoughts, if that's something we could do, or if that's just how that could get implemented, or what anybody else on the committee thought about that idea.
So you saying if let's say you spent $500 on local businesses and you saved all your receipts, and we give you, or maybe it's $100, let's make it easier. You turn in to, when the community center's open later, I guess, turn in your receipts and they give you a $10 Nifty Yifty gift card. So it's sort of like a reward points or something to encourage people to spend money of their own, but then we give them a little reward at the end.
Absolutely. And I think as a community, I think, everybody's trying to do what we can. We all love Mason. We all love our businesses, our small businesses. We all want to help. I think the fear of the virus and wanting to stay in is going to, hamper that. And then the economic uncertainty because of this has people less likely to want to go out. So I'm trying to find a way to incentivize people to overcome those two fears and get out and support these businesses. And I think it's more of a capitalist approach, maybe, where we're putting the power back in the hands of the taxpayers to do what they already want to do. And then it actually, we're saying it's going right to these small businesses and will help them. And I think people would do that.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I like about the Nifty Yifty program platform is that you could actually give your favorite business person that's closed a tip as long as they can take electronic payment. Is that correct? I'm going to have Eric answer this one.
Well, Jenna will, if you broadly define a tip, anyone that takes and Jenna, correct me here, takes a MasterCard payment can accept a Gifty card for services. I think some of the technical language, they don't allow, like if I were tipping my server, the Gifty card probably isn't used for that. But if I want to give my server a gift, if I want to re-gift the card, essentially, that is possible. Jenna, did
I think at its core, any business that can accept a MasterCard can be a part of the Nifty Yifty program. Yifty, as the company itself says, it's blatantly states on the card, you cannot use the card to tip, but I think we can work with the businesses. There's going to have to be some creativity on their side to say, it has to be for some type of purchase or service in return. So I don't think we can use the word tip, but it could be a future service, or you can even use it to purchase gift cards or a future credit. I think there's ways to get around that. I wouldn't classify it as a tip though, because technically you can't tip using the card.
Okay, I'm glad you clarified that. Sorry. When you're brainstorming in these meetings, it's good that we have our experts with us. Mike?
Yeah, while we're brainstorming, I'm just thinking about, sorry, an economic development opportunity for us to perhaps spend some of these dollars to say Mason is a safe community. Come to Mason. We have done something. I mean, Michelle, I don't know what we could do to help our local businesses promote the concept that Mason is a safe community. We've taken steps to protect you. Therefore, come to us, come to our restaurants, and we've done something to make our community safe for you to come in and spend your dollars here. I think there's going to be some reluctance on people to get out and visit local businesses across the state, across the nation. And is there a way for us to direct some dollars into safety programs that begin to build the concept that Mason is a safe community and come here and spend your dollars?
Interesting. I mean, consumer confidence, right? I mean,
Exactly.
It will definitely be a journey between now and the next 6-12 months. So I think that's interesting. Yeah, definitely something.
I would just say I think it would be a
Take a
public
look
purpose.
at.
Certainly, we could direct some of our dollars into that kind of equipment.
I think messaging is important, and we've done that with the culture of wellness and our engagement around wellness across a lot of different things, whether it's mental wellness and physical and financial wellness, all the things that I know council has done a nice job over the past couple of years of embracing that. And then it feeds a lot of different areas of our city services, from economic development to police so I think that's an interesting concept.
Mike, to piggyback on that idea, you said something earlier, Mason Cares, our Mason Cares Act. I'm wondering if we can develop a cool acronym for CARES and call this our Mason Cares program. I think you mentioned that to me a while back, and then you said it again, and it's really Mike's idea, not mine. I don't know exactly how you'd brand it, but that might be a possibility. Our staff is always so good at that type of thing because we do care. We might be a little slow, but we care. Slow and steady is going to get us through this, we hope. And I too am anxious for the governor to open us back up. I know he's got he's working under the tension of the both ends, and we're all doing that right now, or you're trying to find a way to make the both ends meet. And there's a lot of tension there between it. And so, yeah, there's no easy answers and there's no quick process. Mike?
Yeah, so Mayor, I wanted to get back to the gift card program that we've already got authorized under 43, because I think that's a opportunity for us to see what is the need out there. We've talked about, we don't really know how many people are needy and are going to apply for this funding. And I think that at least I see that gift card program as an opportunity for us to begin to develop an idea of how big is the need, how much need is out there. If we only use half of that money, certainly the need is not great. If we exceed all of that money, then we know there's a greater need, and we can begin to maybe quantify what that need looks like and add to that program or develop other programs that help us to meet the need in the future. But I certainly would encourage us to get that $160,000 that's already authorized out there and try to determine how much need is in the community.
Eric?
I was going to say, certainly that is one, working with the CDC, if that moves forward, that is one aspect we would want to leverage. And certainly if there's some legislative or consensus on council to be able to send that out with a message that whatever that application or vetting process looks like, to gather additional data and encourage folks, even if you don't sell gift cards or you have no interest in a gift card program, fill out the application, because then that can be used as data for additional things that may come forward, whether it's driven from the city or otherwise. And that is something I'd be looking for myself in a service agreement with the CDC in that program, to make sure that they're opening that up that way, so it generates data we could use for other iterations. So, yes.
Yeah, that would be a real big benefit all the way around. An idea I had pitched using the Nifty Yifty is to try to make some milestones for stimulus surges, if you will. Not that we can surge on a huge level, but like a Mother's Day surge where we distribute gift cards with a 2-week window or a 1-week window. We maybe shoot for Mother's Day week. We shoot for Father's Day week. We shoot for 4th of July week, where we've got some intervals of stimulus, and then any participating business that wants to engage in it could participate. And then that way the consumer who gets the Nifty Yifty card can just choose wherever. If I need to get my car worked on, I can use it at my mechanics who takes MasterCard. If I need a haircut, oh, I hope we can get haircuts very soon. Different things like that. You've got some flexibility with how you use it, but if you forget to use it or fail to use it within that time period, the city hasn't lost its investment in that gift card. It just goes back into the pot, and then we can do it again, so to speak. And does that make sense? Not okay. Mike?
Just thinking out loud, and as the governor relaxes restrictions and allows more of these businesses to open up, perhaps that opening week, the gift card is available and can be used during that week to help drive business here in Mason to those businesses. Maybe we follow it on the governor's schedule as he opens things up.
Yes, good thinking. Good thinking. Anybody else have something to add? Eric?
I did want to just touch on, Vice Mayor Gilb and Councilmember Hunter. You've all touched on this in different aspects. And one thing I just wanted to reemphasize from the memo, we've talked about tax credits and tax refunds, and I know Jeff, staff, Jeff, we all get a little, just because it is so sacred, so to speak, it is difficult machinery to tap into. It's not as easy as just giving the taxpayers back dollars on our own time frame. But that being said, I didn't want to be a negative Nelly on that. I think that has helped motivate some other thinking and things that have a little bit more latitude, flexibility. And I think Joe, Michelle deserve a lot of credit on this. We do other things than collect taxes. The community center is a good example, but also utilities, specifically sewer. And there is some capacity there, and that's less cumbersome maybe to consider some type of, and for lack of a better word, sewer rebate or sewer refund. It ties into, and to TJ's point, it kind of changes the model. Instead of looking at where the business need is, you spread more broadly a incentive. The trick then being how you encourage or you redirect that to be spent locally. It ties into businesses, that they still have to pay a sewer bill, even though there's not the revenue coming in, just like rents and other things. So I think there is some advantage if the committee wants to consider or even recommend further work on that towards legislation in looking at some type of sewer rebate that would go to every sewer customer, which is basically every taxpayer. And then how to tie that into, and maybe in order to take advantage of the sewer rebate, you have to get a Yifty card, which is directed to Mason businesses. And maybe I think there's ways to take all the ideas that TJ had mentioned, that Mike had mentioned, that the mayor was talking through, and merge those into a program that accomplishes a little bit of all those. If the committee has interest in that, we would need to do more work to kind of throw out some specific models, but we could advance that towards some legislative action if the committee is interested.
Mayor, so do we know what those dollars are? I don't know what I pay in sewer fees per year or even per month. For the average household, it's different per house, right? Based on that, is it based on the size of the house? Is it tied to the water bill? What's it based on?
I can help with that. The sewer is based on water usage, which is, well, just to give an example of, let's say my house, I think it's fairly typical, the overall utility bill that I typically get is like $100. And of that, roughly $50 of that is sewer. And I would say that, well, and then the rest of that is water. We have no control over the water. We have to pay the water. That goes to GCWW. And then you have the stormwater and as well as the trash collection. The trash collection is more of a pass-through. It's pretty much what we get charged from Rumpke, and we get a better price by doing it collectively, but we would be incurring that same cost. And then finally, the stormwater is based on what's called an ERU, which is basically there's one fixed fee per month for each individual house. So the maximum impact would definitely be on the sewer. It's the largest portion. It's the portion that we have the most control over. And I would say that we can also financially absorb that the most within sewer.
Thank you. Yeah, that is complex, isn't it? So we need to be able to take care of different size homes.
I would say also, I hate to interrupt, it's also probably the easiest and fastest way to get money to the individual residents and businesses, because what we would simply do is not charge the sewer for a specific period of time. So they're not paying it, so they're gaining it immediately. We're not having to write a check or get something or deal with a reimbursement. They're benefiting from it immediately because they're not paying that bill. They're not getting that bill. They're seeing, let's say if we forgo the sewer for 1 month, that bill that they typically will see is typically going to be cut in half, and that puts money right into their pocket immediately. And that also impacts not just businesses, large and small businesses, but residents overall. And then they can be able to decide where they want to spend it or who they want to give it to.
Okay, so my two thoughts that came to mind. I'm sorry, Michelle. So you have to do some work to figure out a dollar amount. You think $50 per month? Is that what I heard you say? So even if we could say, well, if we wanted to make it immediately for next month, they get a $50 off their next bill for those people that sign up. And then the second thought is, we need the marketing department to help us with a better idea, because we keep talking about the sewer department. I'd rather talk about utilities or utility. Let's change what we're calling it.
Yeah, I don't think you need to be so preoccupied with fairness, because the fee is based on usage, and that's fair. So if you have, a larger household, well, you're always paying more anyway, so your benefit's kind of roughly the same. Michelle, what did you want to add?
Oh, I was going to add to, we talked about there's the forgiveness piece, but how do we compel, maybe there's an opportunity to extend it beyond 1 month and compel the household or the business, whomever, to give us their data, register, maybe qualify then for another month that comes in the way of a gift card, so that you can kind of pay that forward, because this piece gives the credit but doesn't address, excuse me, it doesn't address the conversation that we're all having, which is encouraging the reintroduction of those funds back into the Mason small business community. So there's some, as Eric mentioned, there's a little bit of creativity. I think we have some of the data. We'd probably like more of the data. What do those numbers look like? And then gauging tolerance from the committee and council on, how long does that look like? Is it 1 month? Is it 2 months? Is it 3 months? And some of the mechanics. Does that represent, you think, Eric, some of our conversation?
You keep looking over there, Michelle. I'm up here.
I don't know where you are. That is funny. Yeah.
Yes, I think we have some ideas, the creativity, how to link it, create the expectation, and to pay those dollars forward between the gift card, utility amount, and the messaging. And one piece of that I don't want us to overlook here, the YIFTI card is flexible for merchants that sign up for it. And so if a merchant hasn't signed up for it, then it's not marketed to them. It's a fairly easy, and we can do some more messaging on that. But like Jenna said, if you accept a MasterCard, you can make this work. But they do have to do it. And that's the way to redirect it to that audience, because it's not just any Mason company can accept that. You have to have actually registered, just like you would for a MasterCard.
Well, and I think if we market that, I'm sorry, I jumped right in. As far as, you know, we do a mailer, do a banner across 42 like we do for our other events to help bring awareness to it. Or, I mean, I don't, if we need people to start going out and going door to door to knock on businesses saying, hey, do you know about this program? Can you sign up for it? Whether it's insurance or the mechanic or the nail salon or the flower shop or the restaurants. Yeah, I mean, we want everybody to realize that if it's $50 for just 1 month, that's $800,000 that's getting plunged right in. You know what I mean? And you did 100, that's 1.6 million. So, I mean, that's a lot of money that I think immediately comes into people's hands.
Yeah. Encouraging that stimulus, challenging people to shop local, which we're all doing, but enhancing that message. I would like to say that I think we should move forward on the sewer plan or legislation, and I'm okay with taking it month by month. We'll be meeting every month. So if we try it 1 month and we find out it's successful, and then we decide to plan on another month, that's fine. And I want to applaud staff for thinking outside the box. Mike, did you have something?
Yeah, I'm just thinking along those lines, and I wanted to ask the question maybe Jeff can respond to in terms of, I like the immediacy of that relief. It's a good way for us to quickly operate. The question I would have is, can we direct that relief? Can we say, we want to provide that relief to this class of provider, and perhaps not broadly to everyone, but specifically targeted to a small business or a segment of our community that we're trying to give some assistance to?
The notion, and that's still a good question, but the notion that staff were talking about and what makes it easy is that it is if you pay a sewer bill, you're eligible. You know, it's all in. Not to interrupt the question, but that's what we were certainly thinking.
No, and I'll tell you, that's exactly what I was going to say, and that's something that Joe and I discussed yesterday. In order to make this apply equally, really, when you talk about your sewer utility and that bill that people get, the easiest way and the fastest way and the broadest way to do it, this is one area where council controls what the rate is. And you could pass an ordinance that says for the month of blank, you know, May, June, however you want to do it. And remember, we have two rates. We have residential component and a non-residential component. And you could say that the rate for the month of May is 0. And that's it. That's an ordinance that temporarily adjusts the sewer rate in the city of Mason. And that would have an immediate impact on anybody who receives a utility bill.
But we want them to sign up. We want it based on people that sign up, or the businesses anyway, right? We want the businesses to sign up.
What I'm to answer the vice mayor's question is to do this in a way that doesn't classify or overly complicate the program. And one option council could take is to say, for the month of May, the residential and the non-residential sewer rate in the city of Mason is $0. And then that would apply to every single residence or business, that anybody who gets a sewer bill, whether you sign up or not. There would be no sign up. For that month, the sewer component of your utility bill would be based on a rate of 0 instead of whatever the current rate is.
And it would be true of stormwater as well as waste and recycling. The only one it could not apply to is water, because GCWW sets those rates.
The trick there, Councilmember Hunterlaw, and is, yes, in the messaging. So it may be, and I don't want to spell it out too much, but sewer rebate, give us your email address when you're receiving that sewer rebate, and the next month, that whatever that rebate was or an approximate amount is the gift card that goes to residents. So there is a little bit of a hook and a broad base, a hook, and then a target. You're not gonna be able to direct it all, but you kind of hit several pieces.
I love this idea. I think it keeps us from picking winners and losers. It keeps it more fair. I think it's got a duplicity where it's helping. I mean, it's helping citizens and businesses. I don't know.
That would be dual purpose, not duplicity.
Whatever. I guess I don't know
Use that word.
double give back was my notes. It's power
There
to
you
the
go.
taxpayer. It's equitable. And I had used a stimulus check. I mean, there's a stimulus check coming from the federal government, or maybe some people got it. You know what I mean? I want to remind people that money is coming to help. Sorry.
The marketing will matter a lot if you pursue this. You have to have a strong message.
What's timing? How quick?
We could draft something with some of these ideas with some specifics for legislation on the utility piece for your May 11th meeting.
No, I want something sooner than that. We're going to be calling. Somebody's going to be calling a meeting before that, I'm sure. So,
just as far as the timing too, we're trying to work with GCWW as far as the timing of when we do that and when the bills go out. And same thing with the marketing is going to be key. So we were talking about doing an insert with that utility bill so that they could be able to know that they need to be able to sign up. So we would need to make sure that that is developed, it's printed, and it's ready to go. So a lot of this gets into timing, but certainly the quicker you can be able to authorize it, the quicker we could be able to implement. But a lot of it's going to be within that time frame for working with GCWW and being able to move forward with it. And some of it's going to be tied to the billing cycle. So we'll have to kind of work through that. But soon, the sooner that there is legislation, the sooner that we can move with the actual implementation.
So we could pass something saying we're in the process of putting this together, and it wouldn't be implemented for a week after council approves it or something.
If council, we need some time to get the particulars together. The particulars will be governed by timeframes that we don't control as far as billing cycles. You're also going to want time built in there for the merchants to sign up for the gift card, to even make it possible there. I think if we do our part, we could have legislation that could be adopted at the May 11th meeting.
Yeah, but you can't market it to businesses before we pass it. So I mean, we want to get something passed saying, Eric, go ahead and start working on this, right?
The committee right now can say, we're keenly interested in that. Get some particulars together. We can be marketing, limited marketing, just like we already have been, sign up for the YIFTY card program because council's interested in some incentives directed that way. We have the gift card program that Mike Gibb was talking about with the CDC and that common gateway. I think you can set an expectation out there without particulars. We can work towards that. If you adopt it May 11th, and if it's adopted by 5 votes, it takes effect immediately. If it's adopted by 4 votes, then there's a 30-day delay. But we would still be implementing it. I think at a minimum, you're going to want some time there for the messaging to get out to folks. That it's not as easy as just printing something up and then everyone instantly reads it. You got to have that kind of echo effect that people are really aware of it. We can start ramping that up if the committee is keen on it.
And Eric, I think, is it fair to say that it's kind of a 2-step flow of infusion? The first one is that hits the small businesses and everyone, the sewer discount. The second one, you have a little time. I'll need a little time to, deliver that second wave of discount, presumably in that one of the concepts that you talked about. So the gift cards wouldn't be going out immediately. There'd be some time in there.
have to have time just to gather the data to illustrate it, but I think the messaging could encompass it all.
Yeah.
As well set the stage for any future iterations that may be needed.
Yeah, I just want to express I think it's a great concept. My only caution is would want to be sure that somebody just doesn't come get a zero sewer bill and not realize what's happening, why it's zeroed out, that they understand that that's an incentive program the city's working on.
You inevitably will have those folks because not everyone, communication's never 100% and never 100% accurate, but we'll get the word out.
Okay, so it sounds like we're ready for action on the sewer concept, and then let's talk about action steps for the other concept programs. How much time do you think you need, staff? Do you think you could be, if we had a finance committee meeting and potentially another economic development committee meeting prior to May 11th, do you think that gives us enough time to have a proposal for council?
I think what you need, whatever steps you get there, is a partner and a dollar amount.
Okay, my personal preference is that the partner is the CIC, and I don't know the dollar amount. I think I want to get more insight from Joe. I want to be as generous as we can, but then I also want to be working under that tension of the both ends. I want to be so generous, but then we have to be cautious too, because we have a lot of unknown. And then how do we identify funds under the tension of the both ends?
My suggestion, and I look at Joe, maybe if on the concepts, if you started to give us something to kind of put into legislation, maybe back end the concept business service program at 200,000 and the business expense grant loan program at 500,000. You're at 700,000 total. I think the third one there is much more customized, much more case specific. So you needn't worry just yet maybe about saying a dollar amount there. That gives you enough for us to kind of drive towards legislation. It doesn't maybe spend everything that could have been anticipated. So you hold a little bit back. And it's enough, kind of like we talked about, start setting that expectation so that folks can we can start identifying the need. Until you say there's something that might be offered, it's hard to incentivize folks to tell you what their need is.
Okay, quick question. If we set thresholds, let's say you set a threshold of 200,000 for the first program and 500 for the second, and then the first program, well, I don't know. Can you cross-pollinate, or do they have to stay separate? So maybe you didn't have as much interest in the second program with $500,000 budgeted, but you had way more interest in the first program that had $200,000 budgeted. Could you borrow from the second program or use funding from the second program, or do you have to go back to council?
It depends on how the legislation is drafted.
Okay. Can we draft it with flexibility there?
I'm sure Jeff can, if the recommendation from the committee is the CIC is the partner on both, that would simplify it.
For me, I'd like that component of government oversight once the distribution is made, but I am very interested if the CDC is willing to help us with that common gateway that you talked about, data and partnering with them in some type of service agreement, and finding out what their fee would be, going forward with them in that capacity to help us with the data component. But with the Community Investment Corporation meets on an as needed basis, and it has on its membership the city manager and then 1 or 2 council members. I'm trying to remember, 2 council members. So there's that extra component of care. That's where I'm at with my comfort zone. Not that there wouldn't be an extra component of care with another entity. It's just that that's my preference. I know any partner would care. Sorry if that came out wrong.
I think Jeff could draft some legislation then that sets some dollar targets and some latitude between the two.
Yeah, Mayor, I like the concept of what we're talking about here. And Joe, I'm going to give you some homework because I know you're, you gave us a memo about what happened in 2008 and the 20% reduction as a potential drop off, and that still left us plenty of funds to be able to do this. I'm not sure what that cliff looks like for us coming out of this pandemic. And I'll give you some homework to prepare for a finance committee to talk about maybe some worst case scenarios in terms of what our finances might look like if the cliff is deeper than 20%, perhaps 40%, 50%. What position does that put the city in financially? And like to hear those numbers as we look at what are the right levels to commit on from here.
Mike, hang on one second, TJ, just so I don't forget, because you know how my brain forgets things. I want to piggyback on what you said with that. One of the things we talked about was getting those local dollars spent back in the local community. And while we don't collect sales tax revenue as a city, our county does. And so the health of our county depends on sales tax revenue, which is lowered now. But also we have businesses that are part of our ecosystem that will be negatively affected by the closure of other larger businesses like Kings Island, for example. And we don't know when Kings Island's going to open up, but there are lots of surrounding businesses in that ecosystem that benefit from the presence of Kings Island and it being open. There are families in our community that have kids that work for Kings Island that don't have jobs yet. And I say yet because I'm very optimistic. So, you know, focusing on how we get those Mason dollars respent back in the Mason community makes us all stronger in the local and regional sense. And then understanding, you know, how far can we go with generosity, because we need to understand our worst case scenario. And I'm a former Kings Island alum, and I'm just so heartsick that, you know, they're not able to open on time. It's just, I never would have thought that in a million years, and here we are. So anyway, there's a lot that we need to understand. And I don't know if anybody has anything to add. I know TJ, I interrupted you. Sorry about that.
The only thing I was going to ask, I thought I read somewhere, and I don't know, maybe Joe knows this. I think there's been requests by states to get help with their finances from the feds, and I think they're saying no to that, and so there's no money coming to the states, there's no money coming to counties, there's no money coming to the cities. So there is no, I gotta be careful on the word, there's no help coming to us if we don't take care of our own finances, correct? I mean, so we're going to budget in a way of worst case scenarios, and we know this is like nothing we've ever addressed before. I know you're very conservative minded on that's why we're in the position we're in now, is because we want to protect that. I want to see how we're paying for this. We talked about, I think in the past, Red Rhythm and Boom not being, not doing that anymore. The cost savings of the community center, I don't know what that would be, and if you have a number on that, whatever we had in SALT. Is there anything else? I don't want to take money out of funds that were rabbit hole for essential services for the city to be able to then use for something it wasn't created for. And so if we spend money, I want to make sure we're cutting things to pay for a program. What else can we use to cut? What other programs do you see besides Red Rhythm and Boom, or what else that's significant? That's the biggest one, but what else do you think?
Eric, did you want to respond, or?
A lot of questions there. Some of you, things like Red Rhythm Boom, that we're still struggling with. There are things that won't happen because of COVID, and there are things that we didn't anticipate that will happen because of COVID. So some of the programs like Red Rhythm Boom obviously will not occur to the scale or the magnitude of what we've experienced in the past. And there will be some dollars not significant, I don't think, as far as outlays, but as far as timing, staffing that will be lost as a result of that. There'll also be some expenses that are saved as a result of that. Certainly the concert series downtown, I'm just not even willing to guess what it may look like, but obviously it will change. So your expenses will shift, you'll save some, but you'll also lose some. And the community center is one example. We're not getting the revenues there from programs, from memberships. Now, maybe there's a way to spend other money on programs differently to try and recoup some of those revenues and save some of the, I don't have those all together yet, but it's a hard question to answer because the eggs we had before are now scrambled. And it's not as easy as these were expenses and these are revenues and what's cut to regain that. We just have to be a lot more nimble in what we do and what the new payoff looks like. But that being said, I think and Joe will be able to speak to this, these are the times when the way you budget pays off because you budget revenues and expenses, kind of a worst case scenario. So we already operate on a budget that looks like a recession. So you will have within the budget, and budgets are impacted by revenues. It's not like it's cash in the bank. It all depends on what's coming in. But you have resources both in programs that won't occur, expenses that won't occur the way we budgeted them, that will cushion any of the impacts. To Vice Mayor Gilb's concerns, when you don't know what worst case scenario looks like, you don't know how big the cushion has to be or how long it has to go, but you're in a good spot today because you've been very prudent for years. If you were to look at services cut, you could say things like, well, brush chipping. Well, we haven't been doing brush chipping, but we've had to do other things. There are other expenses that you may hear about where, it's actually smarter to spend more of that money now because you have a lot of savings that could be realized in the current economic climate versus what you're expecting to do before. I don't have an answer what other programs you would cut apart from Red Rhythm Boom, Music and Mason, some of our recreational programs. Police and fire are in a different, shuffle there. Joe, can you think of any other easily, snow and ice? We know you can cut that because we didn't incur as bad a season.
I would say that, we're going to approach this the same way we approached the Great Recession, where we're going to do a careful examination of capital projects. That's where our discretionary spending is going to be at, and looking at what we would necessarily do now, what we defer. That's where we have the most flexibility, and certainly look at staffing. If there's vacancies, do we really think carefully about when and how those vacancies are filled? Revisiting, operating expenses. How can we, I think we operate as efficiently as we possibly can. We certainly have looked at, contracting out services because it was more cost effective, but we will be, continuing to revisit a lot of that. And certainly, as Eric said, we certainly attempt to approach our budgeting from a conservative standpoint, and we approach that same thing as far as any type of COVID-19 federal support. We plan for the worst and we hope for the best. So we're in a position that if we don't get reimbursement or if we don't receive funding, we're not going to be damaged. That we're not going to take a police officer off the street because we didn't get reimbursement from the federal government. We certainly hope that we do, but there's no guarantee. Just like certainly the state and the county is impacted. We're going to see an impact in things like the fuel tax. We're going to see impacts on how much money we receive in the local government funding. And we're going to be looking at all of that. And as I said in my memo, the current projection based on the Great Recession was about an 11% drop in the general fund revenue. But yeah, we continue to look at that and trying to be able to measure that. I think the hardest part is a lot of the income tax, even during the Great Recession, it was lagging behind. So just like what we're receiving in April is tied to wages that were paid in March. So we know that we're just now seeing the month of March, which only has a partial impact. So it's actually not going to be until July, so until we have a really good indication of what that's going to look like. And so we're trying to do our best guess. Certainly other finance directors throughout the state are looking at it, and I think our projections are pretty much in line, but it's still very much unknown because we don't know the duration of the virus. Certainly, the quicker that there's confidence among the public to go back to work, to go back doing the things that they normally did, we're going to see a quicker bounce back. But until we really know that, we're just taking guesses at this point. And we're going to approach this just like we do with our budget. We're going to plan for the worst and hope for the best.
If I could give a city manager abbreviated version, TJ, there may be some reimbursement for some of our expenses associated with the issue from the feds, maybe even from the state. No one's getting in line to reimburse us for lost revenues. And that's similar case you'll hear from businesses. Maybe I'm getting some expenses, but it's the revenues that I really care about. That's the spot we'll be in. And one other thing I wanted to add, just to segue from that, and maybe a more optimistic note, and pertinent to the Economic Development Committee, and Michelle may want to echo in this, Mason, that this is a unpredictable, unprecedented, interruption in activity. But all indications long-term for our business prospects, our economic development recruitments. We had a great streak here at end of year with new prospects. I have not heard one word yet that they are slowing down or reversing course. Mason continues to be a good place to do business, even if we can't be doing business right now. Whenever and whatever the other side of this looks like, I'm extremely confident that Mason as a place to do business for our corporations is going to continue to be an excellent source. And that ultimately to everything else we do is what fuels Mason's success, both small business, residential, workforce, is by attracting a large quantity of high paying, credible jobs to the area. That's what generates the business for everyone else, has the spillover effects, generates the jobs for our residents. That's really always been, and I'm confident on the other side here will be the key to our success. And every indication so far is that door isn't closing. We'll come out of this and there will be opportunity here to really fuel economic development like we have in the past.
I don't know how I could say that much better, but I will just, and I know council is aware, but we do, continue to keep a very robust, open dialogue with those employers to understand their position, as well as, a nod to the team that is outside of economic development, engineering, planning, others that are keeping those projects that Eric mentioned moving forward at a pace that is, unchanged. There's a possibility we'll see it'll go a little bit slower. I do think actually on a few of them, because we don't know how quickly companies may get steel or, they may take a pause, but no one has indicated that there's any change in course of plan, and we're driving towards that same objective. And also we see positive things, across small and large companies. So they too hopefully are as conservative as the city and are still able to make some business decisions in light of the things we don't know. So the other thing about that is the diversity of our industry sector. Again, these are things Economic Development Committee knows, but it's, Mason has one of the most diverse industry sectors. Southwest Ohio has a very diverse cross-section of industry sectors, the region, and that does make us strong. In terms of Mason, though, I think we'll continue to look very carefully at each industry sector because they are all impacted so differently, and then work closely with Joe and Eric and the leadership to measure some of our expectations. But by and large, yes, strong, diverse position.
Thank you, staff, for speaking to the tension of both ends and how we are very responsibly, trying to identify what the worst case scenario could be and hoping for the best. So that tension between both ends, taking our time to be very measured and careful, but also having a sense of urgency that we want to provide relief to the best of our ability as generously as we can afford, as quickly as possible. I've been referencing a little bit from social media, and I thought I did see a funny, and not that I want to make light of this hard situation, but I was just thinking about that funny comment I saw and the tension of both ends, because there's that, that worst case scenario and then there's that funny comment that I read that, Mason is so wealthy that when it toots, $2 million falls out of its undies. And I just thought that was such a funny way to identify that other end, from someone who thought, wow, I mean, they ought to just be able to do these things without thinking, but we do have to take some time to think through it. And I'm so glad we could get, information out to each other and to learn, and the things that staff is working on. It's so outside of the box, and that we can reassure the public, we are not writing a blank check for something that's mysterious. We're trying to figure this out together. What are the action steps to get us ready for legislation on this idea for May 11th?
Which idea are you referencing now? I was going to try and sum up here my action items I have down. A memo for council that kind of goes even further, worst case scenario, financial impacts. A legislation proposal for a utility, using the utility avenue and some connection to drive activity to local businesses. Legislation on the first two concept business recovery programs here, utilizing the CIC as a partner and setting the first iteration for both of those at 2 and 500 with some inner loans, or I'm not sure the right word, interoperability between the two of them. That's what I have in my notes as far as deliverables for that next council meeting. And obviously we would be trying on the legislative proposals to at least get drafts out earlier than the meeting to solicit.
Okay. I promised council that at least two committees would meet on this, economic development and finance. When is a good time for the finance committee to take a review? Should we follow your lead on that? And you can just let us know when you're ready to show us your legislation. And do we need another economic development committee meeting? I think maybe it's best to allow you to decide that, or to cue us on when it's time.
My suggestion, and Joe, I'm looking over at you. Maybe let us get that financial memo out to the finance committee with some outlines of the discussion here. And if the finance committee feels like they'd like, further discussion on that, we react to that. Otherwise, we keep moving forward, trying to get legislation in shape for May 11th.
Okay, that's great. I want to make sure you guys have plenty of time to, not that you're not completely overloaded with work, and I know that you are, but I just thought if we don't have to meet, that might be better for you to help you work more efficiently. I just don't want anyone to think I reneged on my promise to meet as a finance committee, but it sounds like the memo would be satisfactory, and then we can decide from there. Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Mike?
Mayor, just briefly, the other thing I would want us to maybe to pursue, think about is to make sure that as Mason businesses are coming back open, that if there's difficulty with them meeting safety requirements, they can't get access to PPE or other needs that they have, if there's a way for the city to help ensure that our Mason businesses are ready to open and they're not going to be hindered by safety concerns as they move forward, that certainly would want us to be on the front end of that and be ready to assist them with that effort. If they're, I don't know if they're having difficulty with that, but if they are having difficulty with that, I think that would be appropriate for us to try to figure out a way to meet that need.
It's probably fair to say, Vice Mayor, we've already been doing that and have fielded calls from businesses with some of the governor's orders as far as their capacity, the room capacity, some of the fire requirements, going in, giving them measurements, our data, our directions, so that they can make their decisions more faster and can configure their workplaces to both meet the requirements and maximize safety. And maybe we haven't talked about that enough, but I know that police, fire, our building inspectors, that has generated a good workload. Michelle Blair has worked with several of those businesses to make sure that we're getting out there and facilitating those. There may be other needs that haven't come up to us yet or we're not aware of yet, because it's kind of cliche now, but it is a fluid situation like all of this. But Michelle opened this meeting saying everyone does economic development in the city. That remains true, and I would hope that we wouldn't need direction from council to keep doing what we've done so well in the past. So we will, yes.
I would add to that Warren County conversations and Ready Cincinnati and other conversations. Everyone would echo your concern, Vice Mayor, and I think we just want to continue to share the resources that are outside city as well. For instance, Procter & Gamble working with the Greater Cincinnati Chamber and others to look at what kind of kits may become available, and we would want to continue to push that information out and put the pieces together with who's struggling, who's in need, and where some of those resources are. So we'll continue to do that work as well.
Yeah, and let me just add that I would. Is there city space? If somebody has a space need that maybe I don't know if there's opportunities to open up space from city resources that they could temporarily occupy or operate out of if they're concerned about being confined, and maybe it's a way to show that we are a safe community, that we offer some additional spacing opportunities for people that have them.
Yes.
Great suggestion. Well, I really appreciate everybody's work. Have we missed anything? TJ?
Thank you, Mayor. So you're wanting to move forward on the first two of these, you're saying. I'm still, even the second one here says grant/loan program. So I'm not sure we're calling that because it's basically in the form of a forgivable loan based on payroll. I heard that comment. Is that based towards number one and number two of these different ideas? Is that how I should be looking at it? I mean, it's basically, I don't know if I can say it. In my mind, we're trying to make it like a tax refund, but it's not. But it's basically, I'm not sure if I follow exactly how that's both those, because the way they're different.
My shorthand version, the first one is broad and is customized to a partnership agreement where we're providing dollars with a pledge of future partnership extraction. The second one is much more of a forgivable loan based upon payroll targets. That's the distinction between the two. The first is a fast, simple. The second is more of a direct recovery through them generating payroll.
What's the deliverable on the first one? The second one's based on the payroll taxes keep coming in. What is it on the first one?
The first one is more customizable, a commitment that they would partner with the city in the future.
So it's a grant. It's just basically,
That is not how we would marketing it. We'd be saying, you know, $1,000, and we want to explore how we could partner to help each other's business in the future. That may be specials at the community center. It may be cross marketing.
okay,
We would want a commitment from everyone that received it, that they would be amenable, that we would both mutually agree on some way to generate more value from that. It
Okay.
may, and I'm just brainstorming here, it may be a commitment to participate with specials in the gift card program.
okay.
There would be some
Is-
commitment.
Well, I want to see those details as we go forward on those. Thank you.
It's customizable, so we wouldn't have details, you know, per business. It'd be part of executing the program.
TJ, it reminds me of the type of service agreements we do with our charitable organizations. So like the Historical Society, in exchange for the funds that we give them, they agree to do certain tasks or like, you know, help us at the community center with teaching kids about local history, different things like that. So it gives you that agility with a customizable service agreement, that there's some deliverable and of value to the city, whether it's through marketing or something they might be able to do with us at the community center. It's a creative process, but it's something that our city has done for years and years. And we just had recently adopted service agreements with some of our charitable giving. Does that make more sense?
It does. So, and of course, I think we revised the charitable giving because I was the only no vote on that numerous times on my issues and obstacles were there, where though I wasn't convinced it was the role of government to collect taxpayer dollars to then to hand out to a few select charities. So, I mean, I had almost the same issues here. I know that was a compromise where we came up with the service agreement and I did vote for it. It still left me struggling on some bits and pieces of it. I thought it was a lose-lose on the charitable giving. I only want to rehash that because I opened that can of worms. It was a lose-lose because we didn't get to pick the charities. The charities didn't all get represented, and the residents have their favorite charities, didn't get to have theirs selected. I think the third point was I thought it was a can of worms. Every charity in the world was going to then start requesting charitable help from the city. And then fourth, my fear is with all of this is that the best way to stay reelected is to keep handing out money to people that vote for you. And so if you give it to certain, I mean, I've had people tell me they're not going to vote for me because my stance on their charity was that I thought, I believe you give personally, even to the CDC. I saw on social media, I caught flack because I donate money to either the Chamber's, CDC's organization to help the small businesses, but I was a no on the city doing it. And people don't understand there's a difference of what I think that we do personally and the personal responsibilities we come together as a community to support something versus, because that's now voluntary versus if we force people to give it through their tax dollars of supporting businesses. And so that's my big issue, just to clarify that. I know everybody here in this group understands where I'm at on that. Thank you for hearing that out. I'll be interested in thinking more about this. Thanks.
Yeah, so
I think if I could interrupt, I'm sorry, Councilmember Hunter, I think I'd liken it to what we currently do over at the community center, and they do very, very well. They work with outside groups, whether it's nonprofits or for-profit organizations, to create partnerships that help both entities, both the city as well as other organizations. And they take on a lot of different forms and a lot of different ideas and concepts, because one idea or one template doesn't meet the needs of all businesses or organizations out there. So the staff over there has done an incredible job sitting down with each organization or business, talking through what their business model looks like, what their organizational mission may be, and then crafting those partnerships that ultimately our goal is to drive advocacy, drive memberships, drive revenues for the community center as well as the golf center. So they're very creative. It could be volunteer hours at Red Rhythm and Boom or other city events. They really, like I said, they've done a great job sitting down And I think that the first step in the programs outlined by staff is just getting back to that, just sitting down, having that opportunity to work one-on-one with those businesses to see really what their needs are and how we can help and how the city can use it to our benefit as well.
Okay, thank you.
And in the selection process, it's just, we set this budget and people who want to apply, it's almost like they're making the selection. We're not picking winners or losers this way. It's much more fair. And yeah, and it's, you know, they have to meet certain criteria and they have to be willing to enter a service agreement with us. So I hope that helps. I know we covered a lot of ground today.
And my only follow-up to that would be is I think whenever, even in the federal government with the PPP, when you think, oh, there's a chance I can get some help as my business, you know what I mean? Everybody and his brother, you know, goes and says, well, that includes me. And what we have to understand is that need is defined differently. There are some people that are in absolute destitute, can't buy groceries this week. And then there's like 4 different steps above that. And everybody would say, well, I'm in need. I want to be able to apply for a program, to the point where you had big businesses, you know, applying, or even Harvard, you had universities saying, well, we want some of this money. And it's like, you get to the point, well, everybody's in need. Everybody in their own mind would say, well, that's part of me. I'm in need because we are all in need. And so we need to find a way where we're controlling that in a way that the money's going to those that need the help most. And yet it has to be fair and broad. And it's a can of worms, and I think it's almost an impossible task. Is that fair?
Well, TJ, if it helps, because I think maybe you're coming from there. I've heard complaints about people applying for federal help that were not as in need as some others, or maybe using it for other purposes. And, you know, we're going to have them self-certify that they've been adversely affected. And I don't know how we, you know, we're not going to be, it's not going to be perfect, but it's pretty good. And, you know, hopefully people will be earnest about it. And I think if they have something you know, a service to provide in exchange of some type, that I think it's kind of meeting it's the best of both worlds. And then with the, you know, the larger program where they have a potentially forgivable loan, depending on how it's set up. You know, I think we've kind of found a nice middle of the road process. Now we just have to refine it and implement it.
Mayor, I just want to say I like the discussion we've had here and the direction we're heading. I just want to reiterate that we've already got a $160,000 gift card program in the chute for immediate needs. I'd like to see that get out in the community immediately, even while we're working on this next phase of assistance and help. And just want to point that out one more time.
So Mayor, so can I kind of put a dollar figure on what we're thinking then? If we spent basically $160,000 already, the utility service sewer deal would be $50. I mean, what's the amount of not collecting revenue, not coming in? Is that, if it was $50 per household, that's 800,000? So are we saying that we're okay a one-time month of $50 per household? Or it's based on who signs up? What's, as Tony says, what's the size of that universe of that program? Or are we going to limit that? We're still going to come to that number? What should I be penciling in for that?
We still need to work on that. We wanted to know if the committee was interested in that, so we can develop a proposal with some specifics for legislation. I think as we do that, and there's some tricks in that, how you direct it, you'll be able to see what the financial impact is. To Joe's point, what he'd say if I wouldn't have jumped in, it's more easily absorbed within the utility fund than if you were to try and use the tax machinery.
I understand. Okay, I was just trying to put a dollar figure and see where we're at, because we didn't even get to the third item on here, and I'm just trying to see where we're at on the dollars of all these programs. All right, thank you.
Anything else? Well, it's been a great meeting. I really appreciate everybody's work and your time. And if if you were following along from home, we appreciate you too. And I would say that's a wrap. Until we meet again. Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jason from ICRC.